The meeting hall was a cavernous, cold expanse. White marble walls with shimmering holographic projections hanging in midair, their soft glow accentuating the stark contrast between the council members and the human delegation. The representatives from the Galactic Council, a group of species far older and more technologically advanced than humanity, sat in their high-backed, levitating chairs. Around them, countless others from across the galaxy observed remotely, their faces flickering across screens embedded in the room's walls. At the center of this ornate chamber stood Ambassador Elizabeth Cade, the lone representative from Earth, her nerves coiled tightly within her as she glanced around at the alien faces, some amused, others disinterested, and a few subtly condescending. She had spent years working to get here, to this very moment, where she would present humanity's case, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this would be a futile exercise. One of the council members, a towering being with insectoid features and translucent skin, leaned forward, its mandibles clicking in what was likely an alien form of laughter. "Humans," it mused, its voice reverberating in Cade's bones. "You think you have a place in the galaxy. A species that can barely maintain its own planet, one that has yet to discover interstellar travel beyond the most primitive means." From the far corner of the room, a different member, a floating energy-based being with no visible form except a glowing sphere, added, "We have observed your primitive struggles for centuries. Wars, environmental collapse, overpopulation. You are still teetering on the edge of self-destruction. What could you possibly offer to the Galactic Collective?" Cade clenched her jaw, her hands steady at her sides. She had expected this, but the sting of the dismissive tone still dug deep. "With all due respect," she began, her voice unwavering, "we've come further than you think. Humanity has been forced to innovate or perish. We are capable of far more than you realize." A murmur rippled through the room, but it wasn't the kind of awe she'd hoped for. Instead, it was laced with mockery. One representative, a sleek, tentacled being, gestured lazily, as if toying with the idea of responding but found it beneath him. "What, pray tell, could you offer that the rest of us can't replicate with a flick of a finger?" Cade's eyes hardened. The tone in the room had shifted from dismissive to openly antagonistic. The projections around her flickered, casting distorted shadows. As she prepared to defend humanity's worth, she felt a sudden surge of cold determination. They might think of humanity as insignificant, but that would change. Somewhere in a hidden lab on Earth, a new weapon was being tested, a weapon they would soon find impossible to ignore. The alien laughter grew louder, and Cade knew that, for now, they would leave the table unshaken in their belief. But in the quiet corners of the galaxy, a storm was brewing. Humanity was anything but insignificant. Back on Earth, the message from the Galactic Council was clear. Humanity was insignificant. It stung. But Ambassador Elizabeth Cade knew the truth. Humanity had always been underestimated. She returned to Earth, where the mood was grim, but the will to prove the Council wrong was stronger than ever. It wasn't just a matter of pride anymore. It was survival. The years following the Council's dismissal saw a rapid transformation on Earth. Faced with mounting crises, climate collapse, energy shortages, and resource wars, the nations of Earth, once divided, finally united under the banner of a common goal: technological innovation, not for prosperity, but for sheer survival. And where others had faltered, humanity surged forward. It started with breakthroughs in renewable energy, clean fusion reactors that provided nearly limitless power. The world's energy crisis began to ease, and in the same breath, human ambition skyrocketed. Space exploration, once a slow crawl, became a race to master the cosmos. Humanity built fleets of ships, capable of faster-than-light travel, and stations that served as gateways to distant stars. But the real turning point came in secret. A coalition of the world's brightest minds, from former military strategists to scientists and engineers, had been working in an underground facility, a sprawling complex buried deep in the Arctic. Their task: to create a weapon that could put humanity on equal footing with the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about shifting the balance of power. And they were succeeding. The first test was a revelation. The new weapon, an energy-based beam capable of destabilizing the fabric of space itself, was fired into an uninhabited moon in a distant star system. The result was catastrophic. The moon was vaporized instantly, a small star briefly blooming where it had once been. The scientists who watched the test were silent, awed by the weapon's power, and by the knowledge that it could obliterate anything in its path. While the weapon was far from perfected, it showed promise. And more than that, it was proof that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The news of the test spread quickly, though not without opposition. The international coalition that had funded the project was divided on what to do next, whether to continue refining the weapon in secret or to announce humanity's new power to the galaxy. The choice was made for them. An alien reconnaissance fleet, unknowingly drifting too close to Earth's territory, picked up the disturbance of the test. Their sensors detected a massive, unexplainable energy surge. Their response was swift. An alert to the Galactic Council. They were not yet aware of humanity's true power, but the ripple of uncertainty had already begun. And now, the Council would be forced to reckon with a truth they had ignored for far too long. Humanity had evolved. The galaxy's perception of Earth would soon change. The news came in a flurry of encrypted messages, each one more urgent than the last. The alien fleet, unbeknownst to Earth, one of many sent by the Galactic Council to monitor lesser species, had arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. The Council had finally taken notice. They were sending a fleet, not to negotiate, but to ensure humanity remained under their control, to remind the upstarts of their place in the galaxy. Ambassador Elizabeth Cade's office buzzed with activity as the first contact team scrambled to prepare for what was to come. The weapon, still in its early stages, was ready, but only in prototype form, and there was a matter of timing. Humanity had little room for error. A single misstep would mean the end of their fragile newfound power. Cade stood by the wide window of her office, watching the sun set over the horizon, her mind racing. The fleet would arrive in hours. The question was, would they believe humanity had changed, or would the aliens, with their vast technologies, strike without hesitation? Hours later, the situation on Earth's largest space station, Orbitus Prime, became frantic. The alien fleet, a seemingly endless string of warships and cruisers, appeared as a dark shadow against the backdrop of distant stars. They were far more advanced than any human ship. Cade's throat tightened as she scanned the data. The fleet had moved into a formation that indicated they were readying for a show of force. They were not here for diplomacy. The human defense fleet, newly armed with prototype weapons and bolstered by a new class of ships capable of faster-than-light travel, was preparing for their first real test. Cade didn't trust their readiness. It was one thing to develop new technologies, but to use them in battle was something else entirely. The stakes were unimaginably high. Then, something unexpected happened. Just as the alien fleet entered the outer edge of the solar system, a communication burst from the lead ship pierced through Earth's defense systems. The transmission was immediate, powerful, and deliberate. The Council's representative, a being known only as Skyron, a cold reptilian creature, addressed Earth directly, his voice echoing through every available channel. "Humans," Skyron's voice boomed, "you are outmatched. Your species is nothing more than an anomaly in a universe of order. Surrender your forces immediately. The Galactic Council will not tolerate further defiance. You have been warned." Cade, standing at the helm of humanity's defense force, felt her blood run cold. This was the moment. The Council had officially declared war. She didn't have the luxury of a long debate. She issued a swift command, activating the prototype weapon, a brilliant, searing beam of energy that shot toward the alien fleet. The blast was unlike anything the alien ships had encountered. In an instant, the first warship exploded, its outer hull disintegrating into a flash of incandescent light. The other ships scattered, but they were unprepared. The sheer destructive force of humanity's weapon had caught them entirely off guard. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Cade couldn't believe what she was seeing. The prototype weapon had worked. Against all odds, humanity had struck a decisive blow. It was a gamble, a risk that could have cost them everything. But for now, they had won the first round. But Siren's voice crackled back into the communication system, colder and more venomous than before. You have not won. You have merely delayed the inevitable. As the alien fleet regrouped, Cade felt a surge of determination. The stakes had just been raised. Humanity had proven it could fight back, but the war was only beginning. And now, the galaxy would know. Earth was no longer insignificant. The victory over the alien fleet had sent shockwaves through Earth's defense network. The initial jubilation was short-lived. As the days passed, Earth's leaders and military officials tried to grasp the full scope of what had just transpired. They had inflicted damage on an enemy far superior in both firepower and technology, but the question loomed larger. Would the Council retaliate? Ambassador Elizabeth Cade was back in the nerve center of Earth's war effort, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays in front of her. The Council had not remained idle. New transmissions from the Galactic Council had been pouring in, each one more menacing than the last. The tone had shifted from patronizing to outright hostile. The Council does not tolerate defiance. Xiron's voice had echoed through the communications network once again. Your insignificant weapon will not protect you. Prepare yourselves for the consequence of your arrogance. Earth's first victory was beginning to feel like a fluke. A miscalculation by the Council, an arrogance on their part that allowed humanity a small window to strike. But Cade knew better. The Council would not let this go unanswered. They would come in full force, and this time, there would be no room for error. Days later, Cade's worst fears materialized. The Galactic Council launched a massive counteroffensive. A fleet of unimaginable size, hundreds of warships, accompanied by advanced drones and weaponized automated systems, entered Earth's system. The sheer scale of the invasion was overwhelming. It wasn't a mere threat anymore. It was a declaration of war. Cade stood at the helm of Earth's defense operations once again. The defense fleet, bolstered by humanity's newfound technology, was mobilized. But despite their success, it was clear the Council wasn't just attacking to reclaim lost ground. They were coming to crush Earth completely. As the massive alien armada approached, Cade's communication console blinked to life. It was a message from the highest levels of Earth's leadership. She'd been summoned to a private meeting, one she had hoped to avoid. At the meeting, the stakes were laid bare. The United Earth Coalition's military council had gathered to discuss their options. The general mood was grim. Many were already advocating for surrender. Earth was outmatched in every way. The council's retaliatory force was far too powerful, and the human fleets, while impressive, simply didn't have the resources or numbers to stand against such an overwhelming invasion. Cade's heart sank as the room filled with doubt. "We can't give in," she said, standing to address the council. "We've proven we can fight back, that we can push them to the edge. We cannot surrender now. Not after everything we've built." But the voices in the room were growing louder, more urgent. "What's the point? They will wipe us out. We should negotiate, beg for mercy before it's too late." Her words fell on deaf ears, and for a moment, Cade felt the crushing weight of humanity's fate pressing in on her. The rejection was official. Earth's leaders, despite their advances, were paralyzed by fear. They couldn't see beyond the immediate threat, and in their eyes, humanity's survival was an impossible dream. Cade stormed out of the meeting, her mind racing. Humanity could not afford to back down. If they didn't fight now, they might never get another chance. There had to be another way. Later that night, in the depths of an underground command center, Cade was approached by a small group of trusted advisors. scientists, engineers, and military strategists. They had a plan, a desperate, dangerous plan, but one that could shift the balance of the war. Humanity's superweapon, which had only been used in small bursts before, could be recalibrated to target and destabilize the heart of the Galactic Council's fleet. It was a long shot, but it was humanity's last hope. Cade made her decision without hesitation. We do this now. Prepare the weapon. Earth's forces, on the verge of collapse, rallied around her. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. If this gamble worked, Earth might stand a chance. If it failed, Earth would be nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history. The final decision was made in the dead of night. There would be no more hesitation. Earth would not bend to the will of the Galactic Council. The superweapon, still untested on such a scale, was humanity's last hope. If it failed, they would be obliterated. But if it succeeded, the balance of power in the galaxy would be irrevocably altered. Ambassador Elizabeth Cave stood at the command center, her eyes locked on the holographic map showing the positions of the Council's fleet. It was a sight that would have shattered the resolve of lesser leaders. A vast armada, its ships towering in size, darkened the sky above Earth like a storm cloud. The invasion had begun. Earth's defense fleet, now hastily reinforced with every available resource, was poised on the edge of desperation. Cade's own forces, human ships brimming with the new weapons and experimental technologies, were no match for the overwhelming numbers of the Galactic Council. But humanity's greatest strength had never been in brute force. It had always been in adaptability, in their capacity to innovate under pressure. We have one chance, Cade said to her crew, her voice steady, though the weight of the moment threatened to pull her under. We strike when they least expect it. If the weapon works, we may have a chance. If it doesn't, we fight until the end. The weapon was stationed aboard Earth's largest battle cruiser, the Vanguard, hidden within the heart of the fleet. It was humanity's most advanced technological creation, capable of tearing apart the very fabric of space. But its full power had never been unleashed, until now. The battle erupted with terrifying force. The Council's ships advanced, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space with destructive power. Waves of laser fire and plasma bursts rained down on Earth's defense ships, some of which were immediately obliterated in the onslaught. Cade watched from the command center as the chaos unfolded, but she remained calm. Her eyes were focused on the countdown. In the midst of the battle, the Vanguard's shields flickered under the strain of enemy fire. The ship had been designed to withstand incredible punishment, but even it was beginning to show signs of vulnerability. The crew worked feverishly to keep the systems intact. Cade's heart raced as the seconds counted down to the moment of truth. "Ready the superweapon," she ordered, her voice a force of steel. The weapon's chamber powered up, and an intense, humming energy began to build. The Council's flagship, the Leviathan, moved forward, its colossal size dwarfing everything in its path. It was the perfect target. Cade's eyes narrowed as the weapon's power surged to its peak. Fire. The burst of energy that erupted from the Vanguard was like nothing anyone had ever seen. The beam tore through space with blistering speed, its intensity blinding. As it slammed into the Leviathan, the entire flagship shuddered, its shields buckling under the force. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crack, the ship's hull splintered, its core rupturing in a shockwave that sent debris scattering through space. The Council flagship was no more. Cade held her breath as the shockwave spread, watching as other alien ships veered away, disoriented, terrified. Humanity had just struck a devastating blow. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining ships in the Council fleet regrouped, retaliating with fury. Earth's forces had only a brief window of hope before the full might of the Council descended on them. Cade turned to her crew, her voice resolute. "Prepare for a counteroffensive. We hold them here. We fight until we cannot fight anymore." The war had truly begun now, with humanity's first real victory, a glimmer of hope against an empire that thought itself invincible. But even as Earth's forces rallied, the Council's retaliation would be swift and brutal. The conflict was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The victory against the Leviathan had sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. A single ship, an unassuming human vessel, seemingly insignificant in the grand scale of the galaxy, had destroyed the mightiest warship in the Council's fleet. For the first time, the beings that had once dismissed humanity as nothing more than primitive apes were now faced with a threat they couldn't ignore. But Earth's victory, while monumental, was fleeting. The Council, known for its cold and calculated responses, had already begun to rally. Ships that had scattered in retreat after the destruction of the Leviathan quickly regrouped. This was not a race of species that would give up without a fight. They would not let one loss deter them. Their retaliatory force was even greater than before, a wave of ships powered by advanced technologies humanity had not yet dreamed of. Ambassador Elizabeth Cade stood once more at the helm of Earth's defense operations, her face drawn tight with the weight of the war. The atmosphere in the command center was heavy with tension. Earth's fleet had been bolstered by their superweapon success, but it was clear that even with their new technologies, they were outnumbered. The enemy fleet was still far too powerful, and the Council's response was swift, far-reaching, and merciless. The alien ships closed in on Earth's defensive lines with terrifying speed. Cade watched as the radar blipped, tracking the incoming wave of hostile vessels. In the distance, Earth's ships prepared for battle, though there was no mistaking the fear that had begun to ripple through their ranks. The victory had sparked hope, but the Council's reinforcements threatened to snuff out that hope in an instant. "We can't hold them off forever," Cade muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Her tactical officer, Commander Alex Reed, approached her, eyes grim but focused. "We'll need to buy time. At least long enough for the new prototypes to come online. If we don't—" "I know," Cade cut him off, her voice steady. "We won't let that happen." They had one more ace up their sleeve: human ingenuity, the ability to adapt in the most dire of circumstances. Earth's scientists and engineers had worked tirelessly to develop a new generation of warships, equipped with stealth technology and advanced cloaking fields. These ships, though still in the testing phase, were humanity's last line of defense. The plan was simple: use the prototypes to infiltrate the heart of the alien fleet, disrupt their communications, and buy enough time for Earth's remaining forces to organize a meaningful counterattack. As the alien fleet moved into position, Cade ordered the prototype warships to deploy. The fleet of sleek, nearly invisible vessels sliced through the vacuum of space, barely detectable by the Council's advanced sensors. Their mission was clear: break through the enemy lines, cause confusion, and buy precious time for humanity to regroup. The first strike came as the cloaked ships made their move. The precision was immaculate. A series of sudden, targeted attacks on the alien fleet's communication nodes caused chaos. For the first time, the alien warships hesitated, their once cohesive formations splintering as the lines of command broke down. The alien fleet stumbled, and the precious time Cade had hoped for was granted. But just as the battle appeared to be tipping in humanity's favor, a new, horrifying wave of alien technology arrived. New weaponry, faster ships, and advanced tactics that caught Earth's defense forces off guard. The battle lines shifted once more, and the Council's fleet was no longer stumbling. Instead, they were retaliating with a ferocity that made Earth's recent victories feel like a distant memory. Cade's mind raced as she watched the battle unfold. The Council's counterattack had begun, and humanity had no choice but to dig in their heels and fight harder than ever before. The stakes were higher now. With each passing minute, Earth's survival seemed to hang in the balance. "This isn't over," Cade whispered to herself, eyes fixed on the battle. "We will not let them take us down." The war had escalated, and humanity was no longer just defending their planet. They were defending their right to exist in a galaxy that had underestimated them. And this time, they wouldn't go down without a fight. The war had reached its breaking point. The sky above Earth had darkened with the shadow of the Galactic Council's endless warships, their firepower unmatched, their determination relentless. Earth's fleet, once filled with hope after their earlier victory, now stood on the edge of collapse. Humanity had survived the initial onslaught, but they could no longer keep up with the sheer weight of the Council's response. Every last ship in Earth's fleet was on the verge of exhaustion, their resources running dangerously low. Ambassador Elizabeth Cade paced in the command center, her mind racing. The latest series of battles had pushed Earth to its limits. Earth's prototype ships had done their part, striking at key points in the Council's fleet, but the alien forces had adapted, countering every new tactic humanity had thrown at them. Earth was running out of options, and the moment of reckoning had arrived. The superweapon, the weapon that had given humanity its initial victory, was humanity's final trump card. Cade knew the consequences of its use. They had seen what it could do, and while it was powerful, it was far from perfect. The weapon was an energy-based disruption field, capable of destabilizing entire fleets, but using it on such a massive scale could be catastrophic. There was a risk it might tear apart space itself. One misfire could doom Earth, and possibly the entire galaxy. But there was no more time for hesitation. The Galactic Council's flagship, Azithar, loomed on the horizon. The sheer size of it sent chills down Cade's spine. It was more than just a ship. It was the symbol of the Council's power, the heart of their invasion force. Destroying it would not only cripple their fleet, but it would also send a message that Earth would not be silenced, that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Cade turned to her tactical officer, Commander Alex Reed. "Are we ready?" Reed looked over the status reports, his face grim. "The weapon's ready, but I'm not sure it will be enough. The Azithar is a monster. We're talking about a ship capable of absorbing most conventional energy-based attacks. We'll need a direct hit on its core if we want any hope of taking it down." Cade's resolve hardened. "We have no other choice. We take out their flagship, or we die trying." The countdown began. Earth's forces, battered but not broken, prepared for their last assault. The fleet assembled in formation around the Vanguard, which housed the superweapon. As Earth's ships moved into position, the Council's fleet shifted into its final attack stance, sensing the human desperation and rallying to crush it. The space between the two fleets was a tense, silent vacuum, save for the occasional bursts of energy as ships exchanged fire. And then, without warning, the weapon unleashed its full force. A brilliant, blinding beam of concentrated energy shot from the Vanguard, cutting through space itself, streaking toward the Azithar. The beam collided with the massive flagship, engulfing it in an explosion of white-hot light. For a moment, it looked as though the ship had simply ceased to exist. Then, a shockwave of energy rippled outward, tearing through the surrounding alien ships, destabilizing them in a chain reaction. But it wasn't enough. The Azithar's core was still intact. The flagship, though heavily damaged, was far from destroyed. "We've only crippled it," shouted Reed. "We need to hit it again. Now." Cade's eyes never left the battlefield. "We're out of time. The Council won't let us make another move." The Council's remaining forces were closing in, prepared to annihilate Earth's fleet once and for all. The weight of the moment was pressing in on Cade. This could be the end. But she refused to give in. Reroute all remaining power to the weapon's core. One more shot. Make it count. With the last of their resources drained, the superweapon hummed back to life. This time, the blast was even more intense, an all-encompassing wave of energy that washed over the Azithar in a cataclysmic surge. The flagship shuddered, its protective shields cracking under the strain. Then, with a final deafening roar, it collapsed into itself, its core detonating in a violent explosion that consumed its entire structure. The shockwave from the blast pushed through the remaining alien ships, scattering them like dust in the wind. But the damage was done. Earth's fleet was decimated. Only a handful of ships remained, their systems flickering on the brink of collapse. Ambassador Cade stood motionless, watching the destruction unfold before her. They had won. Against all odds, humanity had struck the Council's heart, delivering a blow so devastating that the invaders were forced to retreat. But it had come at a cost. The battle was over, but the war had taken everything. "We've won," Cade whispered, her voice barely audible, as she stared at the remains of the Azithar. But at what cost? The silence that followed the destruction of the Azithar was almost deafening. For a moment, it felt as though the universe itself had held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. The alien fleet had been decimated in a single blow, the Council's flagship obliterated, and Earth's forces, though battered, had managed the impossible. Against all odds, humanity had struck a decisive blow. But the victory was hollow. The cost had been immense, and the war had left scars that would never heal. The remnants of Earth's fleet floated in space, battered and broken. The Vanguard, though still functional, was barely holding together, its hull torn by the immense energy of the superweapons use. Many ships had been lost, entire crews gone. There were no cheers, no celebrations, only a somber understanding of what had been sacrificed to get to this point. Ambassador Elizabeth Cade stood in the war room of Earth's command center, her hands trembling as she watched the final reports coming in. The remaining ships, what little was left of humanity's defense, were returning to Earth, stripped of their pride, and filled with the bitter taste of victory. "We've done it," Commander Alex Reed said quietly, standing beside her. His voice was hoarse, as though the words themselves weighed too much to say. "We've paid for it," Cade replied, her gaze fixed on the screen in front of her. The loss of life was staggering, and the thought of all the families torn apart by the war was a burden she could not escape. Thousands of human lives had been lost in the final push. Thousands of soldiers, scientists, and civilians who had given everything to this fight. But it had been enough. Earth had survived. The Galactic Council had been driven back. The broadcasts from Earth's leaders began to pour in, messages of hope, unity, and defiance. There were even rumors that some council systems had declared their autonomy in the wake of the